All right, everybody, welcome to another podcast. I'm so glad you're here with us. I got a great guest on today. I think is going to provide a lot of value. He has a unique experience in aviation and started off in the Navy, was a Navy test pilot. But instead of doing the standard route of going off to the airlines, he started his own business in real estate and is doing very well. So I'm excited to bring on the podcast, Bill Allen. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, start off, it's an aviation channel, and just kind of wanted to start off by what was your first exposure to aviation, and how did that drive you to becoming a naval pilot?
Yeah, I'd say most people would say Top Gun, but I actually didn't watch Top Gun until after I went in the Navy. So for me, my dad was on submarines. So my dad retired as a submariner.
Oh, wow.
So when I was a kid, he was in the reserves. He got out of active duty right after I was born. So
Right.
I was born in San Diego. We kind of grew up in Southern California, and we just I knew my dad as a Navy guy, so he pushed me when I went up to college. I'm actually wearing a sweatshirt from Georgia Tech. I went to Georgia Tech, and yep, I did. So I got an ROTC scholarship. So the Navy ROTC scholarship was great for school. Didn't have to pay for school, and my dad was just like, "Hey, go check this out, son. Get a scholarship," because I was going to have to pay for school one way or the other. He just wasn't going to pay for it. Pretty much out of principle. So they, I went there, and then I went to San Diego that first summer, and I didn't want to stay. You could do 1 year for free and then not re-sign.
Right.
And I was a soccer player in college also. And I was in a fraternity. I was doing all the fun stuff. But my dad said, "Son, just go over the summer and check it out. Like you're going to love everything in there." So I went to San Diego. It's called Courtramid. So you do like one summer where it's a week with every type of platform. So it was a week. I was a week on a surface ship. I was a week with a submarine squad. Submarine. I don't even know what they call them. They're not squadrons. Submarine department, like a group of submarines. And then a week with the Marines. It was like 2 days with the SEALs, and then a week with the aviators. And there was an S3 squadron there that I got to check out. We did like swim qual. We did some of the kind of the dunker, the parachute, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then they put you up in a plane, and I was like, "Dang, this is cool, man. But it was all cool. Like the subs were cool. The surface ship was cool. The flying was cool. Shooting all the stuff that the Marines had and all the SEAL stuff was really fun. And honestly, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL that first year. Like I was training to be a SEAL. That was the plan. Mm-hmm. And then the second year, I was still trained to be a SEAL. I signed back up, and now I'm committed. And the second year, I had a friend who just got his Trident. He trained with me, was training me, and then he fell out of a helicopter and broke his back. And my dad was like saying, "Don't be a SEAL, son. You're just going to kill people for a living. What are you going to do after you get out of the military? It's just not a good career." And so that summer, I went with the submarine squadron down in Hawaii and checked that out. I was underwater for 3 weeks out of the 6 weeks I was there.
I was going to say,
these guys work way too hard.
Wow.
It was rough, man. And then so the third summer, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go check out an aviation squadron." I really enjoyed that. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I went up to Whidbey Island, Washington, up north of Seattle, and was with a EA6B squadron. And these guys just played golf all day, drank beer, and flew airplanes. And I was like, you know what? This is for me. I could get used to this. And so that was my first real experience with the Navy squadron. And at that point I said, "Hey, I want to do this. It seems like the most fun job I could do. A lot of options. They don't work that hard. It doesn't seem." And it was fun. Like I got to fly around in an EA6B in a jet, ejection seat, low to the ground. We did like a low level flight. I was like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever done."
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't even flown in a Cessna at that point. Like I legitimately hadn't flown a plane before, just being a passenger in those.
That was the first real experience into like flying in aviation, was that time in the ROTC.
Yep, exactly. Had never flown a plane. My dad wasn't a pilot. I was in like some 737s, like commercial flights. That's it.
Right.
Yep.
Wow. That's pretty interesting that, I was Air Force ROTC, and I like the fact that they give you the opportunity to take a look at a lot of different career fields if you don't know what you want to do. and try it out, right? Basically kind of shadow people to understand a little bit more about the job
Yeah.
that you were going to try to get into. So I think that's fascinating. How was the submarine, man? I'm fascinated with submarines.
I'm like 5'6", so it wasn't too
Yeah.
bad for me. I'm like not a tall guy. There was a
Yeah.
guy who was with me who was like 6'3", and he
Oh,
would like woke up one day with this giant. He like woke up in the middle of the night, smashed his head. But we were sleeping on torpedoes. They didn't have enough cots for us, so like
wow.
they put like a mattress on top of the torpedoes down underneath, and we were legitimately underwater for like 3 weeks. I just kind of
Wow.
did my thing, checked it out, and
Yeah.
but those guys are working like when they're after they get commissioned, they're working on the sub and they're working on getting their warfare pin.
Wow.
Whereas what I noticed with the pilots is you don't lead any sailors until after you get your warfare pin. So your
Okay.
only focus is to go to flight school. Those guys were actually having to like work on the sub, stand watch, and work on their quals to get their warfare pin.
Oh, no kidding.
Where for us, you really just flight school is like your only job for the first year and a half. So I just
Yeah.
thought it would be a little bit more fun. But I mean,
Mhm.
it was all right. I couldn't do
Yeah.
it. I don't think I could do it my whole life. It just wasn't
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Well, every time I fly into Honolulu, not every time, but there's been several times I've flown into Honolulu and watched a submarine come into port, and I thought that was the coolest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Well,
say the
cool.
coolest thing probably is coming in and going out of port.
Is it? Because you're actually on the
But
surface.
there's like a whole lot of life and work in between there, which I
Yeah.
wasn't really down for. And
Yeah.
the view from the air is a lot better than the view from underwater.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Well, cool. Well, okay. So now you decide to become a pilot. You're in ROTC. What was the competition like back then? To secure a pilot training slot.
I didn't have that big of a problem. I worked hard. I got pretty good grades. I would say my ASVAB, like the exam that you had to take, was pretty good. But I never saw like a lot of. I never was really that concerned about getting it. I was actually much more concerned about getting a spot at Buds when I was trying to be a
Oh,
SEAL.
gotcha.
Like that was something that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get this. And so I think I went into that from that mindset to aviation, just basically like, oh, okay, I should get a spot. Like I didn't know that
Right.
I didn't really know that I couldn't. I don't think
Uh,
most people they didn't want as much time in. It was like 9 years after you get your wings. So
yeah.
a lot of people weren't willing to put in that much time. So we didn't have a
Oh,
ton of
really?
people like I have to get aviation and folks not getting it. I think they
No
saw
kidding.
that a lot more at the Naval Academy than we did
Yeah,
at
for
Georgia
sure.
Tech. And
Yeah.
so, but when I got to flight school, there was a huge wait. I actually went to grad school right after. So I did a year at Air Force Institute of Technology at Dayton at
Oh, no
Wright
kidding.
Pat
Okay.
for a
Yeah.
year with the Air Force to get my master's right after college. And then I went to
Wow.
flight school. And there was
Wow.
about like, 9 months wait for us to start up. So I was just like
Mhm.
fishing and scuba diving every day. And
Nice.
then
Did you do any flying
that
before?
was competitive. I would say what's that?
I was going to say, did you do any flying before you went into pilot training, or did you just wait to go to pilot training and get
No.
trained by the Navy?
No, when so I did grad school for a year, got a master's in aero engineering, and then I went down to Pensacola, and we were just sitting there in an A pool for like 6 months, just waiting to start
Mhm.
up because there was a big backlog. And at that time, if you just wanted it was something called DOR, drop on request. You could actually just quit and not pay back your college. They had so many of us that they were just like way too overstaffed and overmanned for new aviators that you could just
Yeah.
quit and walk away. And I had quite a few
Wow.
friends that just said, "Hey, I'm out. I got my college. I'm going to go out." Because I mean, this was a time like this was like 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
So it was there was like jobs in tech, and a lot of these people were going out making really good money in the private sector. And so,
Right.
but we just sat there for 6 months, and then I
Mhm.
did have to go fly a Cessna. It was called IFS, is what they called it for us. So I think you guys call it like UPT
Yeah.
or something.
Initial
Airport,
flight screening.
is that right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ours was initial flight screening, and so I went to Destin, Florida, from Pensacola, and I flew Cessna. It was a 172. I got up. You get up to like it's an abbreviated syllabus. So we'd go solo. We do solo cross country, and that's pretty much it. It's probably
Oh,
like
cool.
20 some hours of flight time, and so I did that
Yeah.
before. We all had to do that before we start flying. It was a T-34 when I was a student.
Gotcha. And they're started in Pensacola,
Yeah, but that was,
your
it's
flight
like
screen.
6 months. It's like after you check in. So you check in. Some people did it if they were stashed at their school for a while. They got it done where they were before they came down to
Oh,
Pensacola. But for me, I was in grad school, came down there, waited to start IFS. It was 6 months. We check in every single morning. I bought a boat, went fishing every day, and just had fun while I was there.
Of course, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but they're paying us to be ensigns. It's probably like a airline pilot sit in reserve, I would think. It's like something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, you get through pilot training. What was your weapon system when you got through naval pilot training?
Yeah, so everybody flies in the Navy. Everybody flies a T-34 then, and now it's a T-6. It's the Texan II that we fly.
Mhm.
And after that, you go to your advanced syllabus. So that was what was really competitive. Getting jets was really competitive then. So
Yeah.
once I got there, I was like, I want to fly the F-18. Like that's
Mhm.
my mission now, is to fly the F-18. And then sure enough, I had phenomenal grades and pushed, like I selected right at the end of the fiscal year, and they didn't have a single jet slot. They gave away 2 jet slots the 2 weeks before I selected. And then they put me in a helo. So I went back to Pensacola. So I was in Corpus Christi, Texas for primary, went back to Pensacola and flew. For us, it was the TH-57 then, the helo trainer. And then when I got my wings, I went out to San Diego to fly the H-60 Sierra. So it's the Navy version of the Black Hawk, is what I tell most people, because they saw Black Hawk down.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so going into F-18s, wanted F-18s and then swapped to helos?
Yeah, wanted F-18s, didn't get it. So there was not a slot available for jets across the entire U.S. Navy when it was my week. So we're just like week to week. You select and you say, hey, this is what I want. And I had phenomenal grades, did really well in primary. And I remember them saying, hey, Bill, like there's a needs of the Navy that you don't understand. And we need guys with good grades to fly helicopters too.
Correct.
But honestly, I was like heartbroken for months. I even remember showing up to flight school there at the helo school for like 2-3 months, just basically being like, I don't even want to be here. And so I had to have a serious attitude change. I had a pilot mentor instructor really change my attitude, because I definitely didn't have a good one going into that place.
That's very similar to the experience I had in pilot training. So I went to Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma, which, as you know, it's a joint jet pilot training base. So we had Navy guys there, we had Marine guys there too. And it was hyper competitive. And for the Air Force, it's a split. It was T-37s back then, but T-37s to T-1 or a T-38. T-38 was the fighter track. The T-1 is the heavy bomber track, or actually it was heavy track. They just switched it back then just to heavies. Fighter bomber was the T-38. So I did well enough to get a T-38, but I was track selected already in the reserves because I took a reserve slot to go fly a C-5. Well, you're not going to turn down a fighter slot. So when they offered that to me, I said, yeah, absolutely. I want to do that. Well, fast forward, the needs of the Air Force, the reserves sent me to go be a C-5 pilot, not an F-15 pilot. So they kind of denied it. And I just started T-38. They call it B mission. So basically T-38 ground school. And the commander and the flight commander came in and said, hey, sorry, we really fought for you, but we're going to have to send you to the T1 unit because the reserves want you to go T1s. So like you, I was, I earned it, right? Like I put forth the effort. I studied. I did everything I could to earn that slot. I did. Now you're telling me, well, tough luck. We got to put you back into T1s. So like you, I had a mentor that took me by the collar and just said, hey, do you want to graduate or do you want to self-destruct and fail out of this program? And just kind of had a really a good mentoring session with me and kind of set that right. So, hey, kudos to mentors, man. Like that's why I'm trying to help mentor people too, because I was that person with that bad attitude and like, hey man, I deserve it. Well, you know what? You don't deserve anything. You're very lucky to have what you have. So I like your story with that.
Yeah, I think there's a big lesson there for everybody that's listening. It really is the fact that a lot of times we, like you said, we may have thought that we earned something, but it's like, how can we make the best of the situation that we're in? You're not always going to get everything that you plan for, But when I look back, honestly, I probably would have been miserable in the F-18 community. And I had one of the best tours of my entire life in the MH-60 Sierra community. Like my fleet tour was so amazing. The people that I met, the relationships that I built, the doors that were open because of it. And what my on wing, it was my on wing in the TH-57. He was a reserve. He was an active reservist. He was flying the SEALs around in some of the spec ops missions and stuff. And he just said, Bill, you did so well in primary. If you do that same thing here, then like you'll be able to pick your location, your aircraft, and everything that you want. If you're the number one guy here too, then you're going to be able to pick whatever you want going forward. It's your best. It's the best opportunity that you have to get what you want. Or you could keep, being a little frustrated and being bummed out about where you are, get bad grades, and then just kind of get stuck where whatever the Navy puts you then. And so right then I just kind of shifted and said, all right, I'm here. There's nothing I can do to change this. Let me just go be the best that I can. Let me work as hard as I possibly can and see where the chips fall. And then sure enough, there was the number one platform that people wanted at the time was MH-60 Sierras. It was a brand new platform. It just came out. And the number one location that everyone was picking was San Diego, California. And sure enough, I became the number one guy. There were like 20 some people that selected with me. And there was one spot for Sierras in San Diego, and I got it. And so, nice. Without that, I don't know. I'd probably be flying like Jacksonville, and there might be somebody listening that's like, I love Jacksonville. Well, let's say Corpus Christi, Texas, MH-53s was like one of my classmates got stuck there, and nobody wanted that job. So, I think it's really important when you get served lemons, you hear it all the time. Create lemonade. It's kind of like what we have to do at times. It's not always going to be exactly the book that we wrote, but honestly, when I look back, like I'm a believer. So I'm like, you know what? God put me in these positions. He set me up for this. And I think that this is the story that I needed the whole way, And so looking back, and I've gotten to fly some jets. I've gotten the opportunity to fly like 50 or 60 different aircraft at this point. I might not have been in that position had I, taken a jet slot. Who knows? So
yeah. 100%. I think, like you said, it's hard. I look at myself back then. It's hard when you're young, you're driven, you're full of, testosterone, and you just want to go out there and kill it. Right. To be told and to be humbled that, hey, look, yeah, you earned that, but we're not going to put you there. And I'm a believer as well. I think the challenges that come up in your journey is to prepare you for the future challenges that are to come. So that was a big disappointment for me. But I think it's setting you up for, the world of entrepreneurship. And we'll get into that too, where there's going to be disappointments all along the way as well. So cool. Well, tell me about the test pilot school. What was the process to get into that?
Yeah, so it's funny, we were talking about jet slots. So I went to, it's probably worth telling a quick story. I went to San Diego. I did my tour there 4 years. Then I went back to, I wanted to be an instructor back at flight school. I did not want to go back to the FRS, which is what we called the RAG, where you go instruct on the helicopter. I wanted to get back to the plane because I really enjoyed flying planes. So I went back to become a T-34 instructor. And the whole time that I was in helicopters, I was actually trying to figure out how to become a jet pilot. So I was like thinking about doing a jet transition. I had another friend who wanted jets too that was in the fleet with me. And me and him were always scheming, like, how do we figure out how to get into a jet? And it just was not appropriate for me to walk into my helicopter commanding officer's office and ask him to sign a transition for me to go jets. Like it would have ruined my career, most likely. It's just frowned upon. They're not, it's kind of like, oh, we don't want to be in this community. I want to go to another community. It just wouldn't have worked. So I was waiting until I got to my next job to fill out that paperwork. So I went to Pensacola and I got a job flying T-34s up there at Whiting Field, just north of Pensacola and Milton.
Oh, yeah.
And there, it's like anything goes there. You want to go be an airline pilot. You want to go in the reserves. You want to go somewhere else. Like people are there from all walks of life and like every different community and platform. We had Air Force folks there. We had Navy folks there. You have international instructors that come there for tours like that. And so people are always trying to scheme to go somewhere else. So right when I got there, I started putting in jet transition paperwork and I just kept getting turned down for like 2 years. It was just like shot down. Every 6 months there was a there was a board, and they just kept shooting me down. And finally, I like call the guy, and I'm like, "Hey, how come I'm not getting picked up? Like, what's going on? What do I need to do?" And he's like,
Right.
"You're too old, and you're too expensive. Like, you're just too old." Because I did a year of grad school, and I just sat around for a year, almost waiting. So I was a real senior lieutenant at that time, and they're just like,
Uh-huh.
"You'll never." We looked at your grades are great. You're the number one lieutenant. You had great, you could do it for sure. You got great recommendations. You're just too old. Like, you're not going to advance in that community. It's going to crush your entire career. And so that's when I said, all right, I need to start thinking about maybe trying to do something else. And I didn't really want to go back to the fleet. I didn't want to go on a dissociated sea tour. So what we do is in the Navy, you go on a dissociated sea tour, you go on a ship for a couple years. So all the aviators have to work with the black shoes, have to go on a ship for a few years as like a shooter on the carrier or doing some aviation jobs around the surface fleet. And I was like, I want to avoid that if I can. So my jet transition would have avoided it. Yeah, we can't fly our entire career. Like, it almost doesn't exist. I got to fly for 19 years straight. So like I figured out how to game the system where I flew every single year my entire career almost.
No kidding.
And I'll tell everybody how to do that. So
yeah.
So what I did was I wanted to avoid that tour, and I knew that my jet transition would do it because I would have gone back to the FRS. I would have had to go back through flight school. I would have had to go back, fly the T-45 and be a retread through flight school all the way through the jet syllabus completely. And so that's when I said, when I was at grad school at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, I was there with all the test pilots. And so I understood what a test pilot was. I knew about it. I had been interested in it. And I said, maybe I could fill out this application. And I also knew a guy in my fleet squadron, my department head. He graduated from Empire Test Pilot School in England, and so he was the best pilot I ever flew with. Like, when I flew with him, if he listens to this, he'll totally agree with me. He was totally full of himself. He believed that he was one of the best in the world, but he could back it up.
Yeah.
And so he flew on the numbers. He was insanely knowledgeable. He probably taught me. He was one of the people in the fleet that taught me some of the most about thinking, making decisions, those kind of things. And so I said, you know what? Let me try to do this. And that year they were taking somebody for England. So they take somebody from England, from the US, every one person a year. And they take one person every 3 years for France. So there's one in Epner. It's called Epner Test Pilot School in France. They take somebody every 3 years for that from the US. And so it was open. This selection board was US Navy Test Pilot School, Empire in England, and France. And so I applied for France being my number one pick, England being my number two pick, and then US Test Pilot here in Pax River, Maryland being my number three. And it's board selection. You fill out an application. You put in all your information for the board. You have to have an engineering or math background because it's a lot of high-level math and engineering. Yeah. And I got selected. They didn't pick me for France. French usually take a jet guy, but they do have a helicopter program, and they actually send you to learn French first. So they send you to Monterey for a year to learn French, and then they send you into France for a year to be like in the community to learn French because the whole school is in French. It's not in English.
Wow.
And so so I didn't get that slot, but I did get the slot in England. So I got picked up for that. Left my tour there flying airplanes with students a year early. So I did 2 years of my tour there. And then I went over to England for a year to go to test pilot school. That's a 100% washout program. Like, especially in England, they do not like the Americans going in there. And we had never had anybody win the cup. Like it's basically a full-on competition. Like, the number one test pilot gets this huge award. And they never had an American do that. And I secretly just wanted to go beat everyone. So it's kind of my MO on most things that I do. So went over there, had a great time. I got to fly all kinds of really cool stuff, travel all over the world. I probably flew 30 different aircraft there, most for just like an hour and a half. But I mean, I can name a ton of helicopters and planes that I got to fly. It's just really cool learning and experience, and really precision flying is what I learned there. Like, how to really fly on the numbers, plus or minus 1 knot, plus or minus 5 feet, plus or minus 1 degree of heading. Because everything that we did had to be really precise for these tests.
Right. What was your, name a few of the favorite airplanes that you got to fly over there?
So one of my favorites was like an old school fixed wing. It was called a Bassett. It was really cool because it was variable stability. So they could actually change the entire feel of the aircraft in flight. So in the back, you have all these dials that you can turn in. So I'm talking like like all the stability, lateral stability of the aircraft. You can give delays and controls. So you can actually add in like a 5-second delay. So when you put an input in one direction or the other, it takes 5 seconds for it to actually work. So it can really screw you up as far as frequency and oscillation of the aircraft and stuff. So that was really fun. I enjoyed that. But primarily we had the Sea King, which is H3. We were Augusta 109s, and then the Gazelle. Gazelle is a 3-bladed French helicopter that we fly there. So I had a NATOPS check, like effectively I could captain any of those. And the way it worked is you'd go fly once with an instructor, and then you would do a check ride, and then you go fly by yourself. So you're flying by yourself after like 2 hours of flight time on anything that you fly there. But I got to fly the Apache. I got to fly the Chinook. I got to fly, I mean, a ton of different Hueys. We went to Canada and flew a variable stability Huey. It was incredible. The EC-135, 120, a ton of Eurocopters. I got the opportunity to fly the T-38. You mentioned that. Yeah. A bunch of all kinds of different, like just random fixed wing airplanes that we would fly in and just grab a flight. And then when I got to the squadron here, you get to fly in the Osprey. You get to fly. We had Ospreys, we had Hueys, we had Cobras, 2-bladed and 4-bladed. We had a ton of 60s. We had a TH-57. We have, they had T6s at the fixed wing squadrons and F-18s and stuff.
So what is the lead up to, okay, you're going to go fly, the Augusta, is there there has to be some ground school prior. You get the 1 hour, you get the check ride, and then you go fly for an hour, and then you start the process over again for another airplane. Is it a
so the way it worked, so the way it worked is when we get to the school, we basically did like in the first like month, we're doing basic like education, mathematics, high level calculus, differential equations, that kind of stuff, getting caught up on all of that and getting refreshed for all that like deep level mathematics that we have to do. Like a doctorate level mathematics and type of equations, and then also understanding how to write the reports. And then we got to flying. And so it was really, I think England is a flying school with a writing problem, which is really cool, where I think the US is a writing school with a writing school with a little bit of flying. Yeah. So they really cared a lot more about how we flew in England than how we wrote reports, which when I came to the US, I figured out that's not the case. So, so with the Augusta Westland, like the 109, we did some ground school, and then we went out to France to go through the simulator. We did a couple sims. I think I did 3 sims. I think I was there for 4 days. Oh, I'm sorry. That was in Italy. Sorry, not France. It was in Italy. It's an Italian helicopter. So we went to their headquarters there, and we went through the simulators outside of Milan, just not far from Milan. Yeah. And we went through maybe like 3 or 4 days in the simulator there, and then went back. We did some ground school and with a walkthrough, and then just 1 FAM, 1 check ride, and then you're flying by yourself. But like when you get to that point, I feel like same thing for the Gazelle. Gazelle was same thing, no simulator, but ground school. You fly the Gazelle a little bit, and then you're not going out doing like crazy stuff in the aircraft, but you're then starting to do a flight with like me and you. If you were a student, me and you would go out and fly instead of having an instructor with me. But like when you look at this, if you got 1 engine and it turns off, you're auto rotating. If you've got 2 engines and one of them breaks, you're trying to shut it down, relight it. And if it doesn't relight, you're probably landing. So any emergencies, like big picture emergencies, when you think about it, it comes down to just a couple of different systems. And so we did spend more time learning the systems, because once you know how to fly, you know how to fly. It's probably like you guys, I would guess. I don't know. If I was like a 7.3 pilot, or some of the Airbus pilots, like they probably, you're kind of cross-qualified on maybe 2 or 3 different platforms. And they're all kind of similar. So like a helicopter is really a helicopter. If it has a fire extinguishing system, then I'm going to use it. If not, I'm going to get on the ground as fast as possible. Yeah. So, and we would use the checklist like crazy. Like we're not skipping steps. So what it taught me in test pod school is like the reliance on the checklist is like, I don't know anything about this aircraft, so I am going to use the checklist every single time. Like it was, you got an emergency, we're breaking out the checklist. You're going to start this thing up. Like item by item. If I skipped a step, I fail my check ride. Like it's that simple.
Yeah.
So we're not flying around with like flows and things like that. So there's a big difference.
Yeah, no, that's I'm a huge proponent of checklists, especially, going between the 7.3 and the Cirrus or whatever other airplane I'm flying. I am hyper vigilant of using the checklist because I can't go wrong if I use the checklist, right? Commit to
Yes.
memory, most likely that this processor is going to fail at some point. So yeah, checklist, big deal, man. That's super cool. I love flying. So flying anything, as long as it has wings or, an engine and all that. I haven't gotten in the glider stuff yet, but I just love flying. So I think that test pilot school where you get to fly a variety of aircraft and just learn about the different handling characteristics of different airplanes just makes you an unbelievable pilot. I think the more experience you have with different airplanes is man, it just creates a better aviator, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it gave me a lot of respect for the fact that I don't know a lot of what I'm doing. Like I was always around people that were just constantly trying to get better, flying on the numbers. Like I remember taxiing out right. I had to do some flying at Pax River before I went to England. We call it the don't embarrass us training. So like they go put us back because I hadn't been in a helicopter in 2 years. So they put me back in the helicopters and flew me around to make sure that when I showed up there, I wasn't learning on their platform. I showed up like ready. And so I remember I was like 3 inches right of the taxiway. Like the nose wheel was just like probably a couple inches to the right of the taxiway. And I was just kind of taxiing in and my instructor's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" He's like, "Well, if you can taxi 3 inches to the right of the taxiway, you can taxi on the taxiway."
Yes.
And I was like, whoa, like I've never seen somebody this, like, so there's 2 ways to take that, right? Like, what's up with this guy? Like, why is he so anal about this? It's not a big deal. Versus like, if you're going to be off there, where else are you going to be off? So that to me it's honestly the way I do business, the way I do life. Like when people come in and work with me, it very much is how you do something is how you do everything. And so that was really instilled with me, I think, as a test pilot, like just because we can't, like you're off 3 knots on this test and you're off 1 knot on the next one. And then you're off 5 knots on the next one. Like you have to throw out the whole data set. Like it's just, none of it is potentially accurate. And somebody could throw rocks at this down the road. When we approved it for flight, it fails down the road and it comes back to me. So a lot of the things that we do is very much based on precision, which sometimes I can be overbearing when it comes to that. I know as a person, but that's where it started. It started there.
Yeah.
And throughout my training, I feel like I've had really good mentors and people that have really focused on keeping me on point with all this stuff, like keeping me on the numbers and created what I think is a pretty good pilot.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious. You have to be a good pilot to go to test pilot school, and you have to be a great pilot to graduate from test pilot school. So kudos to you. Let's transition a little bit into the business realm. So, well, actually, let's complete the Navy time. You spent 19 years in the Navy. Test pilot school. What?
20.
Back?
So I did 1 year flying
20.
a desk.
I gotcha. 19 years of flying, 1 year flying it. Yeah. And then
that's right.
Gotcha. So leading up to retirement, did you ever go to Whitby, or I'm sorry, not Whitby, but Whiting Field and do that program?
Yeah, I was at Whiting a lot. So
okay. So no, I mean
I was at Whiting from. Yeah, so I went to test pilot school. I came back as test pilot in Pax River, and then I went down to Whiting as a. I went FTS. So after that, I went to active reserves because I didn't want to go back to the fleet as a helicopter department head, and so and I just really wanted to keep flying the plane. I had such fun flying it, and went to Pensacola and became an instructor there. So I was an instructor back at the VTs, the primary training in the T6 this time. I wanted to fly the T6 because I'd never flown it. And so I went back there, flew the T6 for like 3 years active there, and then I went into the reserves because after that they were gonna push me to a reserve base just to be a reserve CO, and I didn't want to do that. So I left active duty, and my real estate business was going really well. So I left active duty and I did my last 5 years in the reserves, and that was how I got to keep flying the whole time.
Gotcha. What'd you think of the T6 really quick? That's an airplane that I've wanted to fly and I have not flown. So it looks
Oh,
amazing.
it's awesome. I loved it. I mean, 7.5 Gs, G suit, oxygen mask, speed brake, like
Wow.
super fast, amazing
Yeah.
PT6 engine. Like I flew the PT6 and the T34 had 550 horsepower. This thing has 1100. I mean,
Wow.
it's a machine. I love that thing. If I could still fly that, I'd be flying it every day.
Yeah.
They told me I was
Yeah.
too old and too expensive in that squadron too, eventually.
Oh, did they
And then
really?
I had to go to Atlanta for a year and fly a test. Miserable.
All right. Well, let's transition to the business side because I think it's super interesting. I mean, you've had a
Yeah.
very successful career in the Navy, did very, very well. I'm assuming any airline would have snatched you up, but you decided, at least when you were in the reserves, to start a business. Is that where your business venture started?
Yeah, it's a little harder for the helicopter guys to go to the airlines, I feel
Mhm.
like. So they're usually starting with like getting their ATP being kind of a little bit of an uphill battle because they don't accept
Mhm.
our twin engine helicopter time at all. And I didn't have a
Mhm.
ton of twin time. I still don't even have a twin license. I still am just a single engine
Oh, that's
licensed
right.
pilot,
T6.
actually.
Yeah.
Um, and so I at that so the reason why I got into real estate is because when I got married, I met a girl in England and she came back with me and we got
Mhm.
married shortly after that and we got pregnant pretty quick with our first son.
Mhm.
And I knew at that time, like I didn't want to deploy again. I didn't want to be away from my family. And I felt like flying in the airlines was almost like deployment. Like I'm kind
Mhm.
of traveling a lot. I don't really love living out of hotel rooms and stuff like that. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I never had the desire to be an airline pilot. So
Mhm.
I would say I have a lot of friends. Almost like all my aviation friends are airline pilots now. I have no problem with their lifestyle and what they do. I think it's amazing because what they love is like half the year, if not more than half the year, they're at home and
Right.
they're doing nothing. Well, I'm at home like almost every day, and I'm still like currently running a business. I don't do a lot. And
Mhm.
so I was for a while, for years, I was doing a lot. But now I
Mhm.
have a point where I can kind of create the lifestyle that I want
Yeah.
and set my schedule. I can do things because I want to, not because I have to. And so real estate, I thought would give me the opportunity to make a side hustle. So I started as a side hustle. I was flipping like one house a year
Mhm.
and making, $45,000 a house. So that was like half my
Wow.
salary while I was still active duty. And so the first house I did was when I was at the test pilot squadron. I came back from England. We got married. I was like, God, I got to feed two people, and my wife's not working. So she was from
Yeah.
England, couldn't work here, and so I just figured out a way to make more money. And I also didn't want to save any less and invest any less. I was investing like 65% of my income, and
Yeah.
so I'm either just going to have to get really, really cheap, and which I tried, and my wife did not want to give up her Starbucks, or I need to figure out how to make more money. And so
Right.
I figured out how to make more money. And so the first year I made 43 grand on my first flip. After that, we moved to Pensacola. I did another one. I made 45,000 on that one. And then I was listening to podcasts just like this and hearing people that were doing hundreds of houses a year. And they had
Wow.
systems and processes and procedures and things like that. And I was like, whoa, what if I could do 12 of these? What if I could do 12 of these? Instead of making 45, I made 30. I can make like 350 grand on the side and still fly airplanes and do what I love. And so I ended up joining a mastermind program. So I paid a guy $25,000 to learn what he was doing. And
Wow.
it's a much longer story. It wasn't an easy decision for me. I was insanely cheap, never even bought a book. I was using my library card at that time. And,
Yeah.
but I got around people that were making millions of dollars and not, and like still at home with their families. And so
Yeah.
I started building a business around my strengths and weaknesses, and we ended up doing 67 houses that first year.
Really?
So we did 67. We flipped 12 houses. We wholesaled 55. So a wholesale deal is basically just I put a house under contract and I sell the contract to somebody else for a fee.
Right.
And I made almost $500,000 in net profit that year, which was
While
like
still being
mind
in
blowing and life changing.
while still
I was
being in the
flying, Ernie.
reserves.
I was flying. I was no, I was active duty. I was
Oh
flying
my
10 or 12
gosh.
hours a day every single day. And so I was in the T6. So I was,
Right.
up at 20,000 feet doing aero, and I couldn't answer my phone. And I was flying one weekend a month. I had to go on cross country one weekend a month then. And so I hired somebody to answer my phone, and because I was sending a lot of mailers out and I was doing direct mail advertising for houses. And then I hired a salesperson to come in and close the deals while I was flying. And I typically, at that first year, I worked from 4:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. in my office and my house. And then my son got up at 7. I made breakfast and hung out with my wife and my son. My son was like 6 months old. And then I went to work. I flew all day, but like in between there, I could answer a text message or an email from time to time or something in between flights. And then I came home. I had dinner with my family. My wife went and watched TV. I went back in the office till like 11 p.m. And that was 1 year straight. At almost every single day, I was working my tail off. But I told my wife, I'll do this for a year, and then we'll never have to work for the rest of our lives if we don't want to. And that was our agreement for a year. I was basically just like, any free time I had, I was working on my business, and I was dropping by the houses, and I was, dealing with contractors, and I was raising money, and I was learning, and I was, taking time off to go travel to these mastermind meetings. I was in the Facebook group asking questions, getting advice from my peers and my mentors and my coaches. And, we just made it happen. The next year after that, we did 135 houses. I did 135 houses, 1.3 million. I was still active duty, Ernie.
Still
when
active
I did that.
duty. My goodness. It makes
and
me
then
feel
the third
lazy,
year,
man, when I was on active duty.
Dude, but most of that was my team and my staff. Like I was a coach. Like I was basically the air traffic controller while everybody else was out there doing the work.
Yeah,
and
but what I will say, Bill, is that you had the foresight to develop the team to make that winning team and make that happen. I think a lot of times I'm looking back, I'm thinking as you were talking, I'm thinking back to my time, and I was a flight commander. I was trying to lead the squadron, and we got deployments, and oh, by the way, I'm a captain and I'm not making a lot of money. So I don't know if I knew I wanted to do more. I just felt like I was limited. But you overcame that, which is a great story, which is, especially for the military folks that are listening to this, getting ready to make that transition, there are options out there to not only make some more money, because the airlines right now are starting to slow down. This might be another play that you can go out there and do it. You can make more money for your family while still working a full-time job. It's just going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, I think what I did was I figured out like my strengths and my weaknesses. What were the times that I had and what was I really good at? And that was building like systems, process, data, that kind of stuff. And I hated answering the phone. I also didn't have time to answer the phone. I also was very bad at sales, which I realized after like 3 months of trying to buy houses that I ended up, 3 months was like a dry spell of that, first year. And then I had to bring somebody in to go be a better salesperson than me. And so those were the two things. I had to kind of hire out my weaknesses. But Ernie, it wasn't easy for me. So like I was deathly afraid to hire anybody. I thought nobody could do something as good as me, so I should just do it myself. And so it really took my coach to say, I don't know how you're even going to do 12 houses. So that's one thing, is probably the thing that you're most afraid of doing is the thing that you need to do to become the person that you have to become to hit the goal that you've set. So that's the number one thing that I see is everybody's like, oh, I can't do that, or I'm not that person, or that's not who I am. Well, that's probably the thing that's stopping you from achieving the goals that you're trying to hit. The second one is exactly what you said. You can build a side hustle that doesn't have to produce, like my plan was to do 12 houses. My plan was not to do 67 houses. And it certainly wasn't to do 135, or the next year we did 187. And they were doing like 200 houses a year for like the next 2-3 years. Like I never even thought that I could build a company or even wanted to or plan to build a company like that. It just happened.
Yeah.
And so like when you look back, you're just getting set up for this and you just have to take that first step. So my first step was to flip that first house. And that was when I was active duty and it was over 6 months. And then the next year I did it again just to prove that it wasn't a fluke. And then after that, I had a little bit more belief. So the belief just keeps stacking in the beginning. And then next thing you know, you wake up and you're doing like 10, 15 houses a month. And it's actually not that hard because you didn't do that overnight. You did it, in the dark when nobody was watching, but you started to build that like experience up. And now like I could legitimately do a house in any city of the country, anytime, no problem in my sleep. It just would not be that hard because but I'll tell you, even just 8, 9 years ago, I was like, oh, I gotta look this up in this book. I gotta ask this question.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. And that's how you get experience. And
Right.
so it's like, I mean, whatever you're doing right now, if you really think about it, it was a long road to get to the confidence and comfortability that you have to do that. Like,
Mhm.
I bet you, Ernie, you don't get into 737 right now and you're like, hey, you know what? Like, it's just like easy for me to turn this thing on and fly it, like no problem. Like in my sleep, I can talk, I can have a conversation, I can think about things. I'm thinking about emergencies. I'm, whatever's happening. But the first time that you were flying it, like you're so in, that's all you can think about. You have
Right.
no spare capacity.
Yeah.
So that
That's true.
capacity is created over time. So I would say to anybody listening to this, it's like, don't be overwhelmed. I have nothing that you don't already have. I didn't have like a ton of money in my bank account that you don't have. I didn't have parents that flipped houses and I grew up in it. I didn't have any of that stuff. And I just started figuring, just a little by little. I got around great people, got some mentors, invested in myself. And like you said, I put in the time and I put in the effort, and I wasn't willing to take no for an answer. But I had no desire to go out like I'm going to build this active duty. And also, Ernie, I had a ground job, so it was a shore tour. I was not deploying. I didn't have a lot of people that I was leading. I was leading a
Yeah.
bunch of reservists.
Yeah.
And like in the beginning, when I was building this, I was a student. I was going back through basically, I was going back through to learn how to fly the T6. And when it's a student and you've been doing 10 times more than that, your job is actually pretty easy. So for like 3 or 4 months of me building this, I didn't have a ton of work to do. My choice was to spend my spare time working on me, not letting myself just do nothing
Yeah.
or
Right.
watch TV, or
Right.
like I gave up the comforts that most people are just not willing to give up for the short period of time that's going to set them up forever. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the difference, I think.
Um, you said something back there where you don't waste time. Let me just ask you, how much time do you spend watching TV back then when you were developing your business?
Zero.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm telling that to people now. Just in the as they try to come up through the pilot training ranks and try to go for their airline job. Look, the more effort you put in now, regardless of what industry it is, the more it's going to pay off later. So I just finished a 4-day trip. I did not watch a single bit of TV. I did read because I do like to read, and I worked on my business, and that's what it takes. So regardless of what you're doing, I think we've gotten into this point where, like my son loves video games, and it's like you gotta it you got to focus on school. You got to focus on what's going to make you a more productive person, not these video games. Video games okay to a certain point, but let's start to cultivate that drive and that desire to achieve something bigger rather than just wasting time. So um, I love that. I love that part, and I like to ask the question of how much TV do you watch?
Yeah, I think then is different than now. So now I do spend that time with my wife, who does enjoy
Mhm.
sitting down on the couch and watching a movie or something
Mhm.
like that. And that's really, she wants quality time.
Yeah.
So I definitely do more now than before, but I'm very careful about what I put into my head also. I don't watch the news. I spend a lot of time off of platforms like that want to just
Mhm.
control my mind and what I
Right.
think and those kind of things. And I really do work on my personal development pretty much
Mhm.
nonstop, like you said. I go to conferences, I read the right books, I try to network with the right people.
Mhm.
I'm trying to build platforms that really have great education and are good for people, as opposed to a lot of the negative stuff that we have out there
Right.
that you could be plugged into. So
Let me ask you this. I mentioned earlier before we started filming, there's going to be a lot of, I just flew with a first officer that was 27 years old. He got hired at 26. He's going to be making a good, high paying salary. If someone wanted, to get into real estate investing, being an airline pilot, working half the month, what do you think the best way to do that would be that would have, set them up for the future, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I, the number one thing is what I started doing, is become a limited partner in a syndication.
Okay.
That's what I would do. My best piece of advice is but don't just go for anything. Don't go for like the best numbers on paper. my biggest recommendation to you is find somebody that you can trust, somebody that you underwrite the people that are going to run that deal. Because the way that works is, so say somebody buys an apartment or a storage unit or an office building or a combination of all of those, or is running a fund, something like that. What you're basically doing is they're creating an entity like an LLC or a fund, and you're buying into shares of that effectively, and you share in the rewards from it. But somebody is out there doing that job day to day, every single day. So they're finding the project, they're underwriting the project, they're managing renovation and repairs, and then they're managing the property for years, and then they're selling it for a profit. So they're basically building a business. It just happens to be an apartment in there, or storage unit, or a mobile home park, or whatever it is, whatever the asset is. And what you're doing is you're providing the capital in there to become a partner that does nothing. So you get an update and you sleep and you collect your dividend checks. And at the end, when they sell it or refinance out of it, you get a bulk kind of payment from the win. And usually you're seeing, I spend a lot of time doing these. I try to double people's money in 5 to 7 years. So I try to produce a return that's somewhere in the 16 to 18% annual type return per year. That's my goal. And so, and I buy as much equity in these deals as I possibly can. So this is where I dump my cash too, because I want somebody else out there working while my money sleeps. And this is the idea of the stock market. This is the idea of certain investments. However, then you're getting into real estate, which I think is the best asset class on the planet. I don't think there's anything else that can touch a candle to it. I love it because it's real property. And there's but what's really important is the person that's out there making the decisions every single day. So I encourage people to get to know that person first, get to know the team, understand what happens if something goes wrong, and then look at the deal. Because there's so many inputs that go into those numbers that you see when you see like a one-page sheet. There's so many inputs that go into that there can be a lot of manipulation as far as those numbers go. But it's really hard to manipulate integrity, character, and when you're under fire, what decisions are those people going to make when things don't go well? And I'll tell you right now, in every single project I've ever done, it hasn't gone perfect. There's always been issues, problems, things that come up. I have stories for days on that. And you want the people that are out there making decisions for the greater good of the entire group, because that's where your money is. So, but I think that's the best place. You don't have to learn a bunch of stuff. You don't have to go out there and swing a hammer. You don't have to do all that stuff. And then eventually when you get some more time, then you can get more on the active side of it. But I would really encourage like early pilots, folks that are making pretty good money. I call it burying money in my backyard. Like anytime I make 50K in a month, I'm putting it into a syndication myself. Like I'm burying it in the backyard and I'm just going to go make more money. And what that's done is it's really grown my net worth massively. Like I became a millionaire at 37 and I've 10x that in the last probably few years just by investing in syndications and doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling, because what I thought would happen in 5 to 7 years sometimes happens in 2. And then I keep stacking that money in. It's just a massive compound net worth growth, which is crazy for me. It's been incredible.
So with the syndications, tell me, it's more than just single family, it's multifamily, it can be storage units, it can be all different classes of real estate. Is that right? On a syndication?
Yeah. Typically you don't see a single family projects are typically one-off investors, could be a fund that's buying single family, but usually what you see is more apartments. You got larger scale apartments. Like we have 290 units that we just bought in Tennessee. We got 355 unit building behind that. And what I do is I have to raise for the 355 unit, I have to raise $14 million for that.
Wow.
So it's basically you're pulling together. It's a SEC investment. So it's registered with the SEC. So I'm actually raising capital from accredited investors. So people that are over $1 million net worth or make over 350 if they're married per year or 250 if they're single. And they come into basically a pool that we set aside between 60 and 70% of that investment into that deal. So, about 70% of the equity, 60 to 70% of the equity of that project goes to the investors. And then we keep between 30 and 40 of it for doing all the work. And so it's a win-win because the bank gets paid first, then the investors get paid a preferred return. And then after that, we split the equity. So I have to pay a preferred return to the investors before I get paid. So we set it up so it's like a huge win-win for everyone. And then we increase the value, sell the property, and then we split all the equities and dividends after that. So it's typically apartments. You could syndicate houses if you wanted to, but I mean, getting an SEC investment, it's costly. It's time intensive. So usually it's a bigger project, like
bigger project. Yeah.
5-6 million plus type purchase. And then you could do storage, you could do mobile home parks, you can bulk, like we've done 2 apartments and an office together to give people some, a little bit of diversification, even inside the syndication and things like that. So, but single family houses, usually, like I've had some airline pilots do that with me. Usually what they're doing is they're just doing a loan. So it's a short-term loan on a house that we're flipping and they're getting paid a return. And that's taxed. That's a little bit higher tax implications, but it's usually like a fixed return that they're getting. So lots of ways to private lend, but I'd say the most passive, in my experience, 100% the most passive is putting it in a syndication. But when you do that, you just get to know the person. That's the best thing I can say. I've lost money doing this. I've lost money doing loans. I've lost money in syndication. I've lost money investing in other businesses. And usually it's the people. Like I'm just investing in the wrong person, and you get a little bit greedy with the big numbers, and they're painting a great picture, but like the benefit has to greatly outweigh the cost. Yeah. And really, you should think about your return of principal before you think about your return on principal. That's my biggest advice.
That's interesting. I like what you
Sorry,
just
I think you
said
froze
there.
for a second. I couldn't hear you.
I froze for a second. I like that. Return of principal, not return on principal. Go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing so when we talk about investing money, everybody wants to know how much return am I getting? So is it going to be 15%? It'd be 20%, it'd be 25%. I could say you're going to get 100% return in 2 years and you're like, all right, I'm in. But the number one thing, like you work so hard for that money, whether it's your retirement account, whether it's your taxable income, focus on making sure that where is that secured? What is it tied to? And what's the likelihood that capital is going to come back? So, I mean, people are so used to the stock market. You invest in the stock market, you buy a bunch of stocks. Like if the stock goes down, let's say you put 50K in, it goes down to 30K. You just lost 20,000 of your capital. Right. Like you just lost your actual capital that you invested in. And you're looking at like a negative return. But you don't, so for some reason, people don't look at that in real estate. They just look at, I put $25,000 in, what's the likelihood if I lose my money? It's like, but they're trying to get 50, 100% returns. And if they lose a couple $1,000s, they're like really freaking out. Like people lose money in the stock market every single day. Today, whoever made money, somebody else lost money. Right. And so when you look at that, just think about your return on capital. Like, what is it like to get my money back? So if you're going to do a loan, make sure it's secured to the property. Make sure you have a first position mortgage on it, and make sure that there's enough equity in there that if that property does go down, you're still going to get your capital back, like your investment back. And so I've done second position loans before where there was a foreclosure and I got wiped out, lost $30,000. I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars learning all these lessons. Yeah. So the biggest thing that I'll say is make sure you get your actual seed money back and think about like, what's the likelihood of that happening? And then let's start thinking about the return that we can make on it. It really is just risk tolerance and just making sure that the benefits like greatly outweigh the costs and the risk of something like that, especially when you get started. And that's where you ask a few questions. If you don't understand something, you just understand it a little bit better. Make sure that the people are open to talking to you, getting to know you, all of that stuff. It's really important.
No, that's good. That's good advice. Now, while you're holding this property, it's obviously being rented. The distributions that you're saying, the dividends that come out are coming out through a share of the rental rent that's coming in. Say it's an apartment building.
Yeah. So typically the way a typical syndication works is if you think of a business, so you're basically like buying a business. It just happens to be an apartment building. So let's use an apartment building that we just bought, for example, in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We have 3 buildings, 290 units just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And so what we do is we try to figure out what's our game plan going to be for this business. If you bought I don't know, a doctor's office. You're going to figure out how to, if the marketing was a little bit down, they weren't that great at marketing, their prices were too low, like all of that stuff, right? How can I turn this business around and basically like renovate maybe I fire somebody, I put somebody else in place, I bring in another doctor that's really like famous in the area, I build some social media because they didn't have any, I put an actual sign in like a sign on the door so people know that we're a doctor's office and grab some foot traffic, and then figure out how to increase the income of the company. So we're going to bring in more revenue, and I'm going to be able to distribute to myself or my partners. And so same thing, we got an apartment building. So the 3 that we just bought, 2 were being slightly mismanaged. It was out of town people that owned the buildings. And so they didn't have a lot of local knowledge. They didn't have a great local property manager. They didn't have other people on site. They had a property manager just for that building. They had maintenance just for that building. Well, we own 300 units right down the road. We own like 4 other buildings right down the road. So now we can share a property manager across all those buildings. We can actually have our handyman just go over to that building if he needs to do some work. And we also are in the area. We're local. We know what's going on. We know the pricing. Their prices were a little bit low of the buildings. And so they were renting them out for a little bit less than they should. And so if we even just add $25 or $50 per unit across 290 units, that's a massive increase in income, right? Some other things that happen a lot of times in apartments is they might be paying for water when we can actually sub-meter the water and bill it back to the tenants and make that change. And that just increases our revenue and income. So there's lots of things that can be done to increase the value of that property and then turn around and sell it. So what we do is basically, once that happens, once we make enough money, we hold back some reserves and then we distribute to the investors. And what we typically do is a quarterly distribution. So, and there's a preferred return, it's called. So everything we do a preferred return so that we make the mortgage payment and then we have to make a certain preferred return to the investors before we do an equity split, which basically is just putting somebody in a preferred position before partners take money. And what that does, what I like about that is us as the general partners that are doing the work to get paid, we don't get paid until the money investors get paid a certain amount, which is usually somewhere between 6 and 8%. And once they make 6 or 8% on their money, then we do an equity split where they can actually make more. So it's advantageous for us to make you more than 6 to 8%, or else we don't get paid. So it aligns everybody's interests. And this is how a good syndication typically works. And so our job is just to increase the cash flow of the building, increase the returns, decrease expenses. And that's how you value an apartment. An apartment is valued based on its net operating income. So income minus expenses, and that's how it's valued. And that's how if we can increase the revenue of the building, we can sell it for a lot more. And that's what's really cool. Like I'm in a 16,000 square foot office right now that I own. I rent it to a church and I rent it out for events and things like that. And so it's not just based on the comps in the area, like they're building all around here. And so it's becoming more valuable, but the more income I can show on this thing in the future and the more ability to create income, the higher the value goes on this property if I go to sell it.
And is the end game always to sell the property, or maybe just to refinance and keep the property going, or how does that play?
Yeah, so not necessarily. In some of them, a lot of the syndications that we do, the investors want to make a return on their money. They're not necessarily in it for the long game. Usually, we have kind of 2 different types of investors. Somebody who wants to like hold a building forever, and then somebody who want to kind of churn their capital and grow their net worth and make cash flow. And so most of the people, I'd say that like the entrepreneurs and other people that invest with me right now, they're primarily like, how quick can I make my money? And then we move up in like the monopoly game of bigger buildings. And then me and my partners are kind of on both sides of that. We're like, okay, let's buy some that we're going to hold for a short period of time to kind of flip some cash, basically flipping apartments. And then what can we actually hold for long-term kind of holds? And so a lot of times we might refinance the investors out at a set multiple to give them a huge return and then keep it. Or we might buy in the future, I'd say buy some with some bigger investors that want to do some long-term holds with us. But the majority of my investors right now are interested in kind of playing the monopoly game and flipping it and flipping it and flipping it.
Flipping. What is a long-term investment to you?
Oh, like forever. Like
forever.
I own a apartment in Murfreesboro, Tennessee It's 93 units. It's right around the corner from Middle Tennessee State University. And I drove my family there 2 weekends ago for the first time that my kids have seen it. My kids are 9, 7, and 6. And I drove them there and I showed them this 93 unit, like brick building. It's like cinder block construction. And I said, boys, this building, if anything happens to daddy, this building will pay you for the rest of your lives. Like this can handle, this can take care of our family forever. This one building, and I only own a third of it. It's me and my 2 partners, but the building's worth like 28 million, and me and my partners each have probably $2 million of equity in it, if not more.
Wow.
And that thing, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when there's no mortgage on it, that thing will cash flow probably like 20,000 a month per person.
Oh, that's awesome. That's the kind of stuff that I want to get out there, to these guys. How many airline pilots, you mentioned earlier, you have some airline pilots that invest with you. What would you say their goal would be once from those guys that are investing with you?
Yeah, I think some of their goals are, since they make really good money right now, I think they're building up a net worth and kind of like a cash bank for the future. And then I think as they get a little bit older, like when they start to get closer to retirement, they're probably looking for more like fixed cash flow. So we have a couple other opportunities that we do where it's like a 5-year term at like 8 or 9% interest that pays every single month. So I have like young people stuff and I have like older people stuff is what I try to look at it as. Because awesome. Like a lot of my aunts and uncles and like some older folks that are getting ready to retire, they're looking for monthly income to offset their mortgage and all their regular fixed expenses. Sure. And that's a great opportunity. But I think most of the people, airline folks, they're looking to really kind of grow their net worth because that's important. Like you make active income. But what I've realized is almost I'm pretty deep in the digital marketing world, like the ClickFunnels community, coaches, consultants, e-com, those kind of people. And there's people that make a lot of money and there's people who are worth a lot of money.
Right.
But a lot of the people that make a lot of money don't realize that they're not really worth much. They think that their business is going to produce for them forever, but it's not. They've got to bury this money in the backyard and they just don't realize it. And so they're constantly buying more ads or putting more money into their business or hiring more people and thinking that one day it's going to be like, it's going to produce so much for them. You got to take the money off the table and create a net worth game. And I think that's what a lot of the airline pilots are doing really well is they're focusing on what they are doing and they're not increasing their spending massively when they increase their income. They're figuring out how much can I save. So if you're young and you're listening to this, you need to save as much as you can early on in life and it will set you up forever. Like I used to save 40%, then I tried to get to 50%. I eventually got to 65%. I remember I was living off like an O2 pay as an O4. And I just put everything away. I just put everything, and it wasn't in savings; it was in investments that are growing long term. So I think that's the majority of the airline pilots that I work with now. It's not a lot of like older airline pilots that are getting ready for retirement. It's like guys my age, which I mean, there's probably a lot of people that listen to this and think that I'm really old, but in the mid 40s, mid to upper 40s, that's kind of where most of my investors are, and they're at a point where they're really trying to like double and triple their net worth over the next 5 to 10 years so that they're in a place that they can make a lot of decisions for their cash flow once they retire.
Yeah. And those are people, like you said, in their mid 40s. Just think if you started this game like my FO, who's 27, he starts this game right now. My goodness. He is going to be worth some money down the road. Well, Bill, sure. We're coming up on our hour. We've actually gone a little bit longer, which is great because I think you have a ton of value. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, you have a social media account and a YouTube account. You want to give that that name out?
Yeah, for sure. I'm on Instagram and YouTube. It's at Bill Allen REI. So like real estate investor, Bill Allen REI. Those are my accounts. I have TikTok, but I forget what it is. I think it's like Fly with Bill or something like that. So we do some stuff on there, but would love that. And we also have a podcast, 7-Figure Flipping. But I mean, you can literally email me. I'm very easy to get a hold of, and my assistant manages pretty much everything. So Bill at 7figureflipping.com. So like the number 7figureflipping.com. You could even shoot me an email. I'll respond to pretty much everybody.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. One of the big things, guys, is making sure you're taking care of your financial future. And I have been a big proponent lately I own some real estate, but I'm really wanting to get into this syndication and real estate game of apartments and all that. And I'm still learning. I don't know all of it. I'm going to get with Bill and learn a little bit more about this game. But I think it's super important. The earlier you start, the better off your career and your net worth will be, and ultimately taking care of your family. So I highly suggest you reach out, do a lot of self study on your own. But these are the kind of stories I want to bring to you to know that you know it's not just about flying the airplane. It's not just about being an airline pilot. It's about living your life, taking care of your family, and doing everything you can for that. So, last question, Bill. You own a TBM. We're going to end it with aviation. Just tell us the progression that you did getting to that TBM ownership, and how has it helped your business?
Yeah, I own a 2010 TBM 850. It was a big, sizable purchase for me, so big step up from my previous plane. I was honestly like scared to buy my first plane myself. I've been in the military, flown all those planes. We pretty much are like downing a plane on a somewhat regular basis for maintenance and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I never had to pay the bill. I didn't have to pay for fuel. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. So it was a big shift. But there was a doctor that one of the flight surgeons at Whiting Field, and he bought like a Piper. I think he had a Piper. And he was like, dude, this is game changing. Why don't you own a plane? You have a successful business. You're driving back and forth from Nashville, because I was a reservist in Nashville going to Whiting. So it was like 6-hour drive. He's like, what are you doing? And I was like, dude, I'm just scared. Like it just seems expensive. I'm really cheap. Like I don't know anything about aviation. I don't have a mechanic. I don't know how to read a logbook, all this stuff. Like it just
Right.
was overwhelming for me. I felt like I was, business 101 again. But found a broker that was a friend of a friend, put it out there that I want to buy a plane. And my first airplane was a Bonanza A36. It was,
Oh, wow.
I bought a 1975 A36. I flipped that. So I bought it for 110. It was somebody who died, and he owned it from 1975. He owned it himself.
Oh,
It was
wow.
one owner plane. It had been sitting
That's
for a
rare.
while in Easton,
Yeah.
Maryland. And I got a great deal on it. It needed all types of like work, but this broker, he was actually an Air Force F-15 guy actually. He went out and looked at it. He did all the books, looked at everything for me, flew it, and he said, "You should buy it, man. It's a great plane." We looked at a bunch of them. I had a family of 4 then, so it was me, my wife, and our two. I think our third boy was just a little baby then, and I bought that. I ended up fixing it up, doing all the avionics. It didn't have GPS in it when I bought it.
Oh, wow.
It was like VFR only.
Yeah.
And I did all the avionics, full upgrade. I probably put about 80,000 of avionics in there. And then I got it painted. I painted the outside for about 15K. So I was in it for about 200, plus or minus, maybe 210. And then I owned it for like 3 or 4 years. And then I sold it to somebody in my mastermind for 350. I sold it for 350K.
Wow. Yeah.
I made like 150,000 on it, minus fees. I had a little bit of broker fees on the sale. And then I turned that into the deposit for my TBM. So I took all that cash, because I bought it cash and fixed it up cash, and I put that 350 into my TBM, and that TBM cost 2.7 million, and my down payment was about, I think I put 350 in, and for me. I was flying over the Rockies a lot. I was starting to fly out west. I got into a position where I was like taking the Bonanza on a 10-12 hour flight out to Boise and things like that. And I got into a couple situations where it was like cold, cloudy, potential icing. And I just was like, this is unsafe, man. It's, not pressurized. I have to bring oxygen with me just in case I want to climb up high.
Yeah.
And I said, if I'm going to be doing this, I want to step it up. And the same thing, I had a friend who bought a jet, wasn't even a pilot, and was chartering his jet. And I was like, man, if this guy can buy a jet with his business, then I can buy a TBM. Yeah. And so I was actually going to buy a Vision jet. I was really interested in the Vision jet, but I flew it. I actually flew Ken Griffey Jr.'s Vision jet as a test.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a really cool experience. Yeah. But after I fly in it, I was like, man, this doesn't have the payload, doesn't have the range and the legs that I could get from something else. Yeah. and it was really during COVID when it was really hard to find everything. So
Yeah.
ended up buying the TBM. I'm so happy. I was between 5 different types: the PC12, the TBM, the Piper, the Vision Jet, and the Epic 1000. And
wow.
I'm really glad that I bought the TBM. I think it was the right choice. It's big in the cabin, got a ton of baggage storage, huge payload, great useful load.
Great range,
I mean, I've
too.
flown San Diego to Nashville nonstop,
Wow. Yeah.
1,600 miles with
Wow.
reserve. It was unbelievable. So
how has that
great.
plane
Oh,
helped your...
you asked me how I use it.
Yeah. How
I
has
use
that
it for my
helped your
business primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how's it? So I usually kind of like just jump in and then try to figure out how to make it work. So after I bought it, I was like, oh, okay, I got to pay like $16,000 a month for my payment. So I basically have like a giant mortgage on this thing. How can I do this? So what I started doing was I started kind of like creating some content in there. I was like, I could put cameras up and forget the podcast like this. What if I did a podcast in the plane? Right. So I do my show in the cockpit. So like I get to fly with people, and it's attracted connections, relationships. It's just some amazing business doors have opened. Like honestly, without it, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right?
No, 100%.
And so it started a little. I do a little bit on social media with it, but really, what it's done is I'm able, if I'm ever going somewhere, like I'm going to a mastermind meeting next weekend, and it's a brand new mastermind. I just joined it. It's for real estate coaches primarily, and I told the group, I said, hey, I'm flying from Nashville to. I don't like flying commercial. I like to fly myself. I'm flying from Nashville to Tampa. I got 4 seats. Does anybody want to come with me? I'm much better getting to know people in a social setting than I am in a big group. And I have a full airplane going down to Tampa and back with people that haven't met, don't know that well. We'll get to know them a little bit better. And we'll create some videos. We'll create some content. We'll be able to kind of cross-promote each other's social media. And so honestly, it costs me way more than I make right now. Like there's no way that it's fiscally responsible for me to spend like 350 grand a year. But number one, I'm in a time machine and I love it. My family, we can go wherever we want. Me and my son I went down to speak at a conference in Florida on Tuesday of last week. I was home on Wednesday night, spoke at 2 events, Tuesday and Wednesday. And me and him got to hang out at the beach for half a day. And he's awesome. 9. He was on spring break. I was like, dude, he just jumped in the plane and went with me. So the experiences that we set up, me and my wife have passes to Disney World. We just go down there whenever we want. It's just a total like shift in lifestyle that is totally worth it. Like time is so much more valuable than money to me right now. So I think over the long period of time, like one of Dave Ramsey's personalities is flying with me. Is the next interview I have.
Oh, cool.
I've got a couple country music singers that are coming in soon. We just kind of like setting, and just it's like getting bigger and bigger. I mean, Ed Reed just flew with me. He's a Hall of Fame safety for the Ravens. Like I spent 2 days with Ed Reed and 5 days at the Super Bowl with, 20 Hall of Famers I was hanging out with each night. Yeah. It's just that those kind of doors open up when you have the opportunity to have some connection that somehow makes it to Ed, and Ed wants to fly, and then we can do an interview. And now I'll probably, in a perfect world, I'll just fly him to the Super Bowl every single year is my plan. Like next year we're going to New Orleans. So
that's cool.
You never know what's going to happen. I think you put yourself out there, take the leap, and there's a ton of benefits across the board.
Yeah, no, I agree. I am wholly into aircraft ownership because, like you said, it's a time machine. I did a workshop in Vegas. I'm here in Scottsdale, and it was a 2-day workshop. I flew home every night, had dinner with my family, and then woke up in the morning, flew back up, did the workshop, came back home. So, I think now that I'm getting older, in my late 40s, I want to spend as much time with my kids as I can, because I know in the military I didn't, because I was flying all the time. So
yep,
that's awesome.
It's really the only way that I can do all the trips and travel and business and be home as much as possible, and not have to rely on anybody else, cancel flights, delays, all those things. And you bring a bag, I can bring whatever, pickleball rackets, whatever I want to do. Like it's just, I'm like there. So I would say for you, if you're ever in Nashville, we're flying in the TBM and we'll do an interview for my show in the cockpit. That would be awesome.
I would love that. I would
Yeah,
absolutely love
I would
that.
love it too. If you make a trip, you get a layover here, I hope you message me and let's go do it. I think everybody would love it.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, Bill. Well, hey, we went a little bit long on the podcast, but I love the conversation. If you guys reach out to Bill, make sure you guys are thinking about the future, especially you youngsters out there that are just starting to come into this new money. You've worked really hard. Don't reward yourself yet. Put that money, like Bill said, in the backyard and bury it, because when it's time to dig that thing up, that thing's going to be massive. So get with Bill, get with your education, look it up online. There's tons of resources out there. But I hope this was really good for everybody on the podcast. Bill, I want to thank you again for spending the time on here. Sorry we went a little bit long, but I really appreciate your insights on a lot of this stuff.
Oh, I had such a good time. I mean, this is when, like, I didn't even know what time it was. So when we're talking about money, we're talking about airplanes, like legitimately could be a week. I wouldn't even notice. It's like all the stuff I love talking about. So I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thanks, Bill. All right, everybody. We will see you on another podcast here in the next 2 weeks. We've got great guests coming on, hopefully giving you a lot of value, something to think about for your future, whether that's in aviation business or investing. And again, we'll see you again on another podcast. Going up, going up, going up, going up, going up, going up. Get it that I'm never